Your host, Scott Cluthe, here on Positively Incorrect. Great to have you out there. Dr. Stephen Covey will be joining me in about 10 minutes. His new book is The Leader in Me, How Schools, Parents Around the World Are Inspiring Greatness, one child at a time, very much using the 7 habits of highly effective people as a template for a model that Dr. Covey has surprisingly found others have started to work with. And now this book is a template of those schools working with it, the educational system, how it affects profoundly the students, the educators, of course, administrators, and the parents, and what that means to us in this true global society. Whether you like it or not, Made in America is a great idea, but unfortunately the challenge might be that it's going to be made somewhere else, and that has to do with leadership ideas and so on. And joining me in the first 10 minutes to that effect is Dr. Leonard Richards. Dr. Richards, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Scott. How are you?
Very well, and thank you for joining me on short notice to act as a bit of a lead-up to Dr. Stephen Covey. Of course, we both know and respect the work that man's done for so many years and how profoundly it's affected so many people internationally.
Yes.
Dr. Richards is, of course, is an established management consultant and executive coach as well. He has over 30 years' experience in business and finance, most of them as CEO or senior officer. Over 10 years' experience in counseling as well. He earned his doctorate in theology, counseling, and major after retiring from active business in 1988. Now that you've retired, you have new tires on the tire, right?
Exactly. It doesn't slow down, Scott.
Not at all, and he works full-time with his life partner, Dr. Nancy White, at the Enhancement Institute here in Houston. And one of the things that, Leonard, you wanted to touch on, and I think this is kind of interesting, too, because you came up with this piece, has to do with, as we're going to talk to Dr. Covey about the work they're doing in the schools, it has to do with laying the foundation before school.
Yes, absolutely, Scott. You know, cellular biology has taught us that the brain begins to wire itself on the basis of the environment the individual finds itself in, even before they're born. And if we take as a premise, just as a spiritual premise, that children don't belong to us, they're not ours, they're not our possession, they belong to life, and they come through us into fullness of maturity, and it's our job to provide them the tools to make good decisions, to live a win-win life. And so to bring them to the school with a foundation of positive self-confidence, high self-esteem, a sense of I can do it, and a template within them for leadership. And that's the parent's job, because kids are going to do what you do, not what you say. And so the parent, in many respects, has to begin to think, have I schooled myself in ways that I would like my child to be? And that's really the foundation, that you take this kid to the school, and then they can use the template much more effectively. I think it's a marvelous template. I think it's a great idea, because the school is where a child has immense amounts of experience away from the parent, and the more positive and the more in-depth they're able to draw themselves into a place of called principled leadership. I think that's terrific, and I think it's a great idea, and I hope it catches on all over the world.
Well, it seems to be effectively being applied in many school districts and internationally as well, and we're going to talk to Dr. Covey about that. You know, one of the ideas that I come to listening to you, Dr. Richards, is that, of course, if the parent is in an antagonistic relationship to their own children, in other words, if they don't have the skills to be the adult, but rather than just a grown-up, it's going to be very difficult for them to remove themselves to how a child responds, and to, as you say, how seriously they take the messages of self-responsibility, decision-making, creative thinking,
right,
and also thinking, even as a child, what consequences. Maybe not long-term quite yet, but still consequences of the actions and what you do and what you don't do. So how does a parent, what parent, single moms, single dads, parents working together, what can they do to maybe start to change the rudder of their ship around today reorient themselves as more of a mentor and support for their child rather than just I told you what to do.
Exactly. The word mentor is a very important word, and I think it's key here. It's really attitudinal with the parent. Most of us at the age where we're parenting we're not fully adult. We're still working on mom and dad and what we didn't get, and we're still working ourselves through that even as we bring children into the world. And so the person who's bringing a child into the world or adopting a child really has to begin attitudinally to look at themselves as mentor, as resource person, to give the child what it needs, to early identify its gifts and allow that child to express those gifts, regardless of what the parent thinks. We have very strong beliefs. We have to suspend our judgment. So there's three things a parent has to do. Has to take on a mentor attitude. I love that word. It has to, he or she has to suspend judgment over the child. And three, this is the long-term thing. It's the hardest thing for a parent to do, to look at their part in things and be willing to step back and correct their own behavior.
And that is a hard thing to do because, even if we have not done the work of being able to effectively hear insights, attitudes, or information that can help us be a better person, we often walk around with a chip on our shoulder and don't want to hear it. In other words, I'm okay the way I am, or this is just the way I am, I can't change. And that immediately gets translated to the child, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It immediately does, because if they see a parent not taking responsibility, not understanding consequences, not recognizing that every day, every moment of every day, you are specifically where your decisions have taken you, and that there are consequences to those decisions, the way they work through consequences is of more interest to the child than that whether or not they get in trouble or whether or not they're right or wrong. And so this is a difficult thing for most human beings, but we have to recognize that we are responsible for our life, and as we take responsibility and understand our own consequences, our kids will do the same.
You had another salient point after the idea that our children are not ours. They really belong to life, and we are pretty much the way showers. What would be your second idea that you wanted to share on the children in our lives?
Yeah, there are children who have special needs. There are children who have identified problems, such as ADHD or maybe a mild head injury either from birth problems or from a concussion. There are children who have mild autism, known as Asperger's syndrome. These are functional problems that can get in the child's way emotionally and, of course, in terms of performance. So it's important for a parent to identify special needs early in life and be willing to help the child get the help it needs. We deal with hundreds of children with these problems every year, and we find that they're amenable to training without drugs. They're amenable to the different systems of learning and correcting functional problems of the brain to give the kid the biggest boost possible into life.
Now, this is the program you do, Dr. Richards, with Dr. Nancy White, of course, spearheads the way, your life partner.
Yes.
How do these techniques, are they being used nationally much?
Actually,
and how do we make the public more aware of these opportunities and tools?
Okay, great. I can give you, it is not only done nationally, but internationally. Nancy White, my partner, just is now the immediate past president of the International Society for Neurotherapy and Research. And we find that the research in neuroscience has been boosting and supporting the work that we do with children and adults. And so you'll find you find them a lot of practitioners in Europe. It's expanding rapidly there, and it's expanding rapidly in this country, where there are between 2,000 and 3,000 practitioners, mostly in the major metropolitan areas. And there are certification requirements. You don't just pick up a machine at the store and start doing patients, although there are a few of them around. And it requires an understanding of the brain's function, of brainwave patterns, things of that kind, a lot of training. But it is done, and it's catching on very rapidly. I just noticed in the emails the other day that 2 or 3 treatment centers, rehab centers for drug and alcohol addiction are incorporating this neurofeedback therapy, which is the core of our program, among other things, that into their rehabilitation programs. And there's a very effective protocol for that kind of thing. So a child can have his brain trained to function well enough that all the intelligence that it has can be expressed. And that's really what it is. When there's a functional problem of the brain, the child generally is pretty highly intelligent, but the way the brain works, it doesn't allow all that intelligence to come through. It's like trying to do the Indy 500 in a Volkswagen bus. It doesn't go.
Dr. Richards, Dr. Stephen Covey, I believe, is joining us now online, so I want to thank you so much for taking a few moments this morning to talk about that educational curve before school and how and the kind of work you can do to help support them. And I'd like to say good morning to Dr. Stephen Covey. Dr. Covey, are you there?
Yes, I am, Scott. Nice to talk to you.
Absolutely. Here, actually been talking for a few minutes with Dr. Leonard Richards here at the Enhancement Institute here in Houston. And Dr. Richards and his life partner, Dr. Nancy White, are pioneers in using non-drug methodology to help support children with learning needs early on in life, ADHD, autism, and so on. So I thought that might be an interesting precursor to your conversation, since we were talking about the educational needs, the need to lay the foundation in the home before the child even gets to school. Wouldn't you agree, Dr. Covey?
Absolutely. I think that they make a great contribution there.
So, Dr. Leonard Richards, thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you again, and you have a wonderful day in Houston. And just to let our listeners know, you can reach the Enhancement Institute and the work that Dr. Nancy White and Dr. Richards are doing at 713-961-5243. It is the enhancementinstitute.com. And Dr. Richards, have a wonderful day.
And thank you, and welcome to Dr. Covey.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Stephen Covey, it's an honor and pleasure to have you on the show this morning. Thank you so much for taking time to join us on Positively Incorrect. You know, Dr. Covey, actually it's so funny because over the years I've been doing this kind of work for over 25 years in broadcast and been able to talk to you about a number of your work. But this new book, you really say, Stephen, that the leader in me, how schools and parents around the world are inspiring greatness one child at a time, has a very special place for you in really your core, doesn't it?
It does, because of my love of children and also my conviction that we're not preparing them for the 21st century.
And unfortunately, I know a number of educators and work out in the business world as well as working in broadcast, and I see that every day. Of course, Dr. Covey is the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and so many others. And this book, The Leader in Me, Dr. Covey, I think it's interesting. Actually, right after the publication of 7 Habits, you were actually approached about some ideas about trying to bring that model into the educational system, weren't you?
Yes, we did, and we did it at a more advanced level, but it was when we talked to Muriel Summers from the A.B. Combs School. She wondered about applying it to elementary school kids. And at the time, we hadn't thought much about that, but I said to her, you ought to try to do it, and if it works, let me know what happens. Well, I'll tell you, it totally transformed her school. She became the #1 magnet school in the entire country. And now that model is being emulated by so many other schools in our country and outside our country with absolutely remarkable, stunning results in terms of academic performance, low discipline problems, the spirit of cooperation, a lot of character development in these children, along with all of their academic performance.
And for our listeners, this is a refresher course. Don't we all need those in life? We never stop learning, hopefully. The 7 habits are, of course, be proactive, begin with the end in mind, put first things first, think win-win, something we need a lot more of, seek first to understand, then to be understood, synergize, and then sharpen the saw. And from that, of course, many other key components have been created over the year. In fact, your son has created some dynamic work as well. But, Dr. Covey, some people would say, well, listen, don't you think that's just a little too much for the little darlings? You know, what are you trying to do here, turn them into corporate suits?
You know, we kind of felt the same way initially, but what we find is that the underlying principles are more easily understood by these kids than by adults. They don't have so much to unlearn.
I'm not surprised.
What happens with adults is that they develop a comparison-based identity based on this cultural DNA. And with kids, there isn't so much of a socializing cultural DNA, which has robbed them of their ability to understand these things. And they go to it almost like a duck into water, seriously.
Now, we were just talking about that with Dr. Richards, how really the early formative years, these templates are set into motion. And we can think that we're doing this and we're changing, but really sort of our orientation toward life, our values, sometimes are so deeply ingrained in this. Of course, we don't see the water we're swimming in, but it is the water we're growing up in and being who we are in or not being who we are in, isn't it?
It is. I really believe that if you avoid the comparison-based approach and reaffirm the essential worth and the gifts in little children, that they will respond powerfully to it. And that's what we have found in these different schools.
Let's talk about the difference between personal competence and social competence, and why social competence is so integral to having a model for America's future, so that we have people that don't just compete, don't just win, but win in a way that
they know how to cooperate,
but serve,
and they know how to synergize and work as a team.
Exactly.
Because all great achievements are essentially the product of some kind of team. Even though one person may seem to get the recognition for it. True greatness lies in character and in contribution. And secondary greatness lies in kind of recognition and prestige and rich and famous and so forth. But
right.
Most parents really want their children to be geared toward true greatness, primary greatness, I call it, and that's what these principles are based upon. And we are astounded to see what happens to academic scores, to the lowering of discipline or other kind of difficult problems, and to what it does to the morale of the faculty, the teachers, and the administrators. None of them would leave these schools.
Dr. Covey, my great honor to speak with Dr. Stephen.
Up in the culture. Excuse me.
That's all right. Dr. Stephen Covey is my guest this morning here on Positively Incorrect. Your host, Scott Cluthe, on Blog Talk Radio. It's great to have you out there. The new book is The Leader in Me, How Schools and Parents Around the World Are Inspiring Greatness, One Child at a Time. Dr. Covey, now we know as adults we've grown up and seen the model of ourselves and how set in our ways we are and so on. When you look into the educational system in many situations in this country, it is wonderful to have these schools that are working with the program, that are working to bring in the social and the individual skills, the competence. But the fact is, a lot of our educational system is broken, and we see the results every day as a school bus drives by on its way home. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What do we do? How does this start?
Well, I think that in the book it describes the steps that you go through, because people have to, initially they get cynical. They think it's just kind of another thing to do on character development, but it's so integrated with their academic work, is so interwoven with it, that they gradually learn initiative and responsibility. They learn respect. They learn cooperation. And they learn I mean, you can feel it the moment you walk into one of these schools. Seriously, I've been in several of them, and you can feel it instantly. The respect that they show to even outside guests, the way they talk to each other. It's a completely different kind of culture that has been created inside these schools. And you can see why they do so well academically and in terms of social skills and character development.
You even have a part of the program they instituted at the school had to do with the children's diaries for success almost. What does that do when they start to lay out their own roadmap for themselves?
They do. And that way that increases their self-awareness, so they're observing their own involvement, and they keep track of their progress toward their goals and what they're learning, both positive and negative learnings. And when people increase in their self-awareness, the space between what happens to them and their response to it gets larger and larger, and they become increasingly freer and more responsible.
You know, it's interesting. I just realized, Dr. Covey, one of the roll-off effects of this, and I don't mean to make light of it, but the children who are fortunate enough to be working in this model and other models of this caliber actually can have a roll-off effect of bringing these values into their very own homes, can't they?
Absolutely. In fact, that's exactly what happens. They become a change catalyst in their home, and they teach these principles by example, sometimes even by precept in their homes, seriously. And there's a great deal of focus in this book on that. In fact, the last chapter is bringing it home and how to develop family mission statements and how all of the habits are interwoven in the development of a family mission statement, so that there is a larger context that helps the entire family separate the urgent from the important.
And that's a real fine definition, because we are so often driven by the urgent, aren't we, versus what really counts long-term.
Most people spend half their time on the urgent, but they know it's not important.
Right.
No other success can compensate for failure in the home.
Yeah. Talking with Dr. Stephen Covey, The Leader in Me, his newest book, How Schools and Parents Around the World Are Inspiring Greatness One Child at a Time. Of course, he is the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and so much other profound work, as well as being the founder of Franklin Covey Company and vice chairman there, world recognized as Time Magazine's 25 most influential Americans, and great to have you here with me on Positively Incorrect for a few moments. What about
Thank you, Scott.
Oh, absolutely, Stephen. It's an honor. What about the administration, though? You know, I know school teachers in Houston here. I've been here 38 years, coming from Philadelphia, and I know teachers here who are cynical. They don't start out that way. They're beautiful people, but they're ground up with the lack of support or the lack of direction from administration, where it's all about trying to get those test scores up, get those test scores up, get those test scores up, and you come out with a little robot that can repeat the answers but has no sense of values and can't wait to get out of there.
That's exactly what happens, and that's why they become cynical. And I think that when they see the cause-effect relationship between character and basic team skills and analytical skills and scores, when they see that relationship, they'll see that there is a cause-effect, and that they shouldn't just train people to just pass tests.
Oh, it's
That's
driven in Houston.
Caused a lot of our problem, and the industrial age model has perpetuated itself into this new economy, which is a knowledge worker age economy, and it's a different world, and it's exponential increase in competition. Markets and technology have been globalized. It's just changing everything, and we've got to prepare our young people for that world.
It also seems to me, Dr. Covey, we need to get into, and I think hopefully the administration of Barack Obama indicates some of this, the joining together, the bringing together of what would look like opposites in a dualistic thinking me win, you lose world into a cooperative set. Because if the model was, well, the kids aren't learning the basics here; they're falling behind. But then we just hammer in information, and we've not developed a whole person. And then we have the school program for music and other activities that are culturally enhancing dropped. And so we've got a major conversational education in this country we need to resolve, don't we?
And furthermore, if business will really see what's happening, they'll sponsor these schools. We have many businesses that are doing this today, and they get turned on by what's happening, and they feel like they have a social responsibility to help support these schools and to make them work, because it's developing the new workforce of the future.
Yeah, we see
and it impacts the entire community.
Yeah,
crime goes down.
I want to point people to your website, StephenCovey.com. In fact, if people are interested from a business perspective or finding a way to bring this into their educational institution, Stephen, what would they do?
It would be leaderinme.com.
Leaderinme.com, simple as that.
Yeah.
You've got all the information there. And again, this is being applied internationally. And this is not about creating a lot of CEOs. This is about each individual finding their own CEO in life, isn't it?
Exactly. It's to develop self-leadership and teamwork and character. And that's what parents really want, is primary greatness. Secondary greatness is rich and famous, but that is the fruit of primary greatness.
And finally, Dr. Covey, why would families want to pick up a copy of The Leader in Me?
Well, because it applies to a family just as much as to a school. In fact, even more, because it's the foundational unit. And they can apply the same exact principles and create the same kind of culture, but it requires parents to live with real integrity and modeling and relating to children by affirming their worth and potential so clearly that the children are inspired to see it in themselves, so that they don't get ground up by this identity theft of the cultural DNA.
Yeah, exactly. The new book is The Leader in Me, How Schools and Parents Around the World Are Inspiring Greatness One Child at a Time. Find your copy. You can also go to leaderinme.com. And our great honor to spend time this morning on Positively Incorrect with Dr. Stephen Covey. Dr. Covey, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life to be with us today.
Tremendous to be with you and with your listeners.
Well, I look forward to connecting with you again, and thank you for all the great work and difference you make in the world, Dr. Covey.
Well, thank you very much.
Take care. We'll talk to you again.
Wow.